Welcome to the Reiki Healing Summit 2023. As we gather here, guided by the wisdom of today's Reiki masters, visionaries, and thought leaders from around the world, we start our transformative journey of nurturing the seeds of light within. Just like a single seed grows into a mighty oak, our personal journey of self-discovery and healing ripples outwards, inspiring and guiding others along the way. Join us on our Reiki quest of cultivating a world where the inner garden of light blossoms in every heart. Now meet your summit host, Yolanda Williams.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reiki Rays Global Healing Summit. Today, we are with the amazing Amanda Jayne, who is a Reiki teacher and an author. You may remember her from last year's summit. We did an interview where you co-authored a book about women in Reiki, and that was such a lovely discussion as well. So I want to thank you for taking time to have this conversation today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what it is that you're going to share because it's an interesting topic. But before we get into it, I just want to make sure everyone knows about you and your work. So Amanda Jayne is her name again. And travel, teaching, and writing have been in Amanda's life for many years. She began traveling when she was 18 to learn about other cultures and the wonderful array of people living across the world. And 12 years later, Amanda left her native England to live abroad. She lived in Kyoto, Japan for 5 years, where she learned Reiki with Chiyoko Yamaguchi and her son Tadao, and moved to the United States in 2006, where she gained a master's in spiritual psychology. In 2009, Amanda walked a solo pilgrimage around 88 temples on the island of Shikoku, Japan, and returned to live in the UK soon afterwards. Recently, she has been living in Kent, Southeast England, where she writes children's books, travel books, and is currently writing about her pilgrimage experience. Amanda teaches Jikiden Reiki and gives treatments, offers heart circle coaching, and can frequently be found practicing Tai Chi or swimming in the sea. You are braver than I. Yes, but welcome again, my love. And I know today we're going to talk about personal and collective transformation, which I think a lot of us think about, the relationship there. And if Reiki itself is the path or to help us along the path. So jumping right into that, could we talk a little bit about that distinction, Reiki being the path itself versus being something to support us on the path or a path? And what do you think Yasui's intention was?
I kind of feel as though everybody would probably answer this differently, which is fine, because I'm not sure that there's necessarily a right or wrong with it at all. I think if we start with Usui Sensei, when you look at what he created, he really created an entire system. I'm not sure of anything else actually that does this in the way that he did it. Mm-hmm. He created an entire system that was there to help everybody for a start, right? Not just chosen few or people who had special abilities or anything. Right. He had this Reiki Ryoho, this treatment method where we have access to help ourselves and other people physically, right? Mm-hmm. So physically is how essentially like he was wanting us to begin in terms of the hands-on to try and help you to move through and to get rid of the toxins in the body. So there's this physical transformation, if you like, that he's offering. Mm-hmm. There's the mental transformation, the emotional transformation, which we all know that the Seiheki Chiryo is there. That can help with that. Now, the physical Reiki helps with that too, right? But using the Seiheki Chiryo, which is like a different treatment as such, like that is phenomenal. I'm sure most people know in terms of how you can actually help yourself or other people move through blocks, aspects of themselves that are kind of stuck and in the way of things or too large or whatever it is. So you've got this physical, mental, emotional, and then, of course, last but definitely not least, the spiritual transformation, evolution that we're all kind of moving through. And so this system literally is there to help us kind of shed all of these layers of stuff that we've accumulated, over lifetimes and lifetimes, so that we can come more and more and more into alignment with source energy, right? And so that's physical alignment, mental alignment, emotional alignment, and spiritual alignment, so that we are, able then to, in that case, be our true selves. I mean, that's eventually the end, is that the true self, the true being is revealed, and I think that he created that system to be like the path, if you like, in terms of what's available there for us all. So I guess that's what, I don't know what he thought, right? We can only surmise, but I just think that in itself is so far, I don't want to say ahead of his time, because most of the wisdom actually comes from further back, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. We have less wisdom today than I think we had before, but
which in of itself is fascinating, right? Like I think of that all the time too. I'm like, gosh, they knew way more back then than what we know now. It's very interesting. But one of the points that you make, Amanda, I think is so interesting too, is how really in just the practice of the techniques within the system, you find that you really can't separate your mind from your emotion, from your body. Like you really get to experience that interconnectedness of our design and our connection to everyone and everything else too. But it's kind of interesting, because I think a lot of us come into this blind, so to speak. Like we really don't know that that's what's going to happen. And actually, you and I were speaking a little bit before, and I told you, like, what I experienced was not what I thought I signed up for, right? But it's interesting that it will reveal all of those layers that you just mentioned anyway. So it's like whether you're intending to heal mentally or emotionally, or you're just curious, if you apply the practices, how could you not experience this shedding away, like as you called it, right? So it's really fascinating that it seems like, I guess, it becomes the path as long as we're diligent in it. Yeah. What do you think about that?
So, I think it's interesting because, I think that is a whole path to transformation that he's created.
Yeah.
But, for me, actually, it's not my path. I think life is the path for me, and everything that happens in life, and that, Reiki just helps me along the path, right? Yes. And it helps me physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually as I move through and along things. And I don't know if you were alluding to this, but I think, one of the things that I notice in sometimes some of the people who I meet when we're talking about Reiki, or students, or this kind of thing, I've met some people who are under the misconception that if you start to do Reiki, you suddenly become evolved. Right. And so the fact that I do Reiki then, kind of gives me some kind of spiritual superiority, or some kind of personal superiority as well in life. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think what that is, because it's a huge misunderstanding. What that does is it stops your evolution exactly where you are, because then you don't bother to go any further, right? Now, of course, just doing Reiki, right? Just putting your hands on someone and allowing this beautiful energy to come through you, that in itself is healing, of course, and is helping us move forward. I have some students who literally just do this because they want to give Reiki to a family member who's sick, nothing more, that's it. They just want to help. And that's brilliant. And that is exactly what they do. And for the most times, I have found that they're quite successful in that, whether it's helping them move out of an illness, through it and out, or whether it's helping them as they transition or for whatever reason they've done it. But so it can be used, just for that, which is fine. But it, and I think what I'm trying to say is that those people, even though they've just learned to do it, so they put their hands on, there will of course be movements happening within them without them consciously perhaps even meaning to have done that.
Right.
Of course it does help you in that way, but it doesn't suddenly make you enlightened or better or all these kind of things. It doesn't. And I think to kind of skip that does a disservice to yourself and everyone around you as well, right?
Yeah, I think it does give definitely an interesting shift in perspective around a lot of things you experience a lot in different ways. But even again, to your point, when I came into Reiki, I was just trying to figure out how to alleviate stress, and someone recommended it. I had no idea what it was. So I was just really had no other intention than alleviate stress. But, I then was practicing on friends. And so there was this disassociation where I thought ooh, I'm having these really cool experiences when I lay my hands on other people. But then on the back end, it was having an impact on me, even though, again, it wasn't really my focus or my intent, but wow, yeah, were things coming into my awareness, right? So I think it's very cool in that way. But so with that, because you do mention, this personal work versus the collective transformation, and a lot of us, especially with all that we've seen in the world, a lot of us have this deep, very genuine desire to want to help out there. I want to help the world. I want to help everyone else be out of their suffering and all of these things. Again, sometimes we seem to separate ourselves from it. Could you talk a little bit about that? Is our personal work and then the collective work, are those two separate things, or are they one and the same?
I see them as, so interconnected.
Yeah.
They're just one and the same. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but they're so inextricably linked, I think. And and I share that dismay sometimes, at what's going on, and I can move into a feeling of helplessness if I'm not being aware and pulling myself back,
Right.
But I think, it is very clear that our access to transformation is the personal. We cannot go and heal the world and what other people are doing, and so of course, and I know it's simple, but the simplicity is where the wisdom is,
Right.
And it is just about, I have to just keep bringing myself back to me and my own evolution and transformation, because it's only through that I do actually get to have an effect on the picture, right? Because and Usui Sensei saw this, right? He knew this, right? He was all about helping the people, each person to person, rather than a whole kind of country or something, because that is the way that we help the world. That is it. And I had a teacher, you mentioned I was doing the spiritual psychology in Santa Monica, and one of those teachers there, he used to say the same thing all the time. And I loved it because it gave me hope, and he used to say, every time one person, makes me want to cry, every time one person resolves one issue, the whole of humanity moves forward.
Wow.
And that's true. I can feel the truth in it, and I know it to be true, because every time I change and move through something small in me, of course it affects, everybody around me.
Yes.
And then they start to change and look at things differently, and I've worked on specific relationships, or I've worked on my responses and my reactions and tried to turn them into responses from me, towards things. And it's a continual work for me. I'm not I'm not enlightened, but I am finding it easier and quicker, and there is movement within me, which is nice to experience, of course.
Yes. And it's so funny, you remind me of, I think about a lot how it seems, I guess, just because of that interconnectedness with all of us, with all, just like we watch the news, even if we don't know people, you still feel it. It hits you. We feel each other, right? How could we not? But we have this thing that I think a lot of times we think we have to match that despair. So like the world is suffering, and so I must feel this suffering. And oh, what can I do? But it's interesting because I always, ask people to think of just the way you feel and are affected by that out there. Don't you think that whatever you are generating is also then going to be felt and have an effect on out there, right? So I think what you're saying really points a lot to that and is very encouraging, because again, in these times, I think almost every day we're thinking like, what can I do? How can I help? And a lot of people just wanting to even just help people in their immediate lives, like their family, and feeling such a loss. So I'm just curious from your own experience and where you have recognized transformation in yourself, responding differently, or just seeing things differently, whatever it may be. Have you noticed that it's changed the nature of any of your connections, or even how you tend to engage with people in the world? Is it any different than how it used to be?
I think very different. That's a really good question that I need to think about here. But yes, I mean, thinking, for example, familial relationships, right? So, again, how does a familial relationship help the world, But it does, as I have moved through my own stuckness experiences and dissatisfaction with things that have happened in the familial space and with certain relationships there, it's fascinating to see how, when you make a movement, of course, the person you're making the movement in relationship with also moves. Of course they do. Right? While you're both behaving in the same way all the time and having the same reactions, it's always going to be stuck, and especially, and I think this was a big thing for me as well, this kind of feeling of being the innocent one, right? It's them, not me, Yeah. When any person in a relationship considers themselves totally innocent, nobody can move, you have to have this sense of responsibility for something within it, even if it's the way that you are responding to the situation. And so, so I've experienced big differences in the way that the people around me relate to me as I have moved, right? Yeah. And I think, in my own life as well, I had quite bad depression in my 20s. I was, kind of a bit lost for a while there, taking a lot of like drugs, alcohol, like this kind of thing to ignore what was going on inside me. And so for me, there's been a huge transformation, right? As I've dared to look at what's inside me and stop trying to avoid that through using substance to a movement. And I think Reiki helped me with this supremely as well, which is a movement from a distrust in the world into a deep trust in our experience of the world and what the world is bringing us. I think that's a huge thing for me, and just that level of trust that everything is okay. I'm okay no matter what happens, right? Including death. Like just that then brings you to a different space, which is just a much better place to be.
Yeah, no, I love so much of what you said. I'm like, gosh, I think it's so helpful for us to even just have consideration of, especially when you talk about our responsibility, like for how we are showing up and what our contributions are in our direct relationships, but again, just out in the world, because it's very easy for us to look out and see like what we think everyone else needs to change or how, they could be better, and thinking that we are so innocent because our intention is good, right? It's always that, like, but that's not what I meant, or my intent, or whatever it may be. I think that's one of the most fascinating things about Reiki is I think it's because of even what you just said too, the looking at ourselves. I think there's a fear around that, right? One, there's a fear of, if I look at me, will I recognize certain projections to have been true? Or what will it mean if I'm this thing, or, you know, whatever label it may be that I really, really don't want to explore, whatever it may be. But Reiki, I think, like I could say for myself, it gave me that cushion, that safety net that you're talking about, to allow me to look. Because I think prior to practicing Reiki, in a lot of ways, I was very defensive. I thought I knew myself, and I was very rigid in the idea of, again, my intention, but not thinking about how I was being could really have a different impact than what I intended. And something about the techniques within the system softened me in a way where I could look at myself without guilt and shame and all of these other things. So it's very interesting, again, how I feel like you just can't even imagine what's going to happen when you start applying Reiki into your life. So I want to ask you about that, because I mean, I'm sure, I mean, you teach Reiki and you've been practicing for some years. What has this path, even though you know your life is the path, how has Reiki really played a role beyond session, beyond teaching? How has it really shown up for you and contributed to your life experience?
You know, there's so many levels on which it helps and has helped me. So there's physically, right? So for example, when I first started to do Reiki when I was in Japan, I'd had typhoid from when I was in Bolivia. I lived there for a little bit, and I caught typhoid, and I was really sick. And afterwards, it had affected my intestines so badly that that I just was in a lot of pain all the time. And so when I went to Japan and when I lived in Japan, I was in this constant pain. I was still drinking quite a lot at the time. I wasn't like drunk all the time or anything, but you know, every night I was using alcohol to relax and to be and to stop thinking about stuff, you know. And so when I started to do Reiki and Chioko Sensei, I got treatments from her, and you know, she told me what to do, which was put your hands on your stomach, like it was that easy. I was like, really? Can it really be that easy? And so you know, I did that, and I did it diligently. You know, I kind of trained myself, and I think that's one thing with Reiki, and I'm always telling my students this as well. It's not like you just take a course and then that's it, right? You've got to train yourself. You've got to retrain yourself in making it a part of your everyday life, so that Reiki is not something you do in that room over there when somebody comes, right? Reiki is just a part of every moment of every day, because you can use it. It's with you. It's available to you. Why on earth wouldn't you use it, you know? And so, you know, she taught me, whatever you're doing, put your hand on there, you know, so that you've always got this connection happening. And that's what I did. And so I used it. I also got treatments from her alongside that, because, you know, she said, like, when it's something bigger, it's good to also get some treatment from someone else. And so that's what I did. And, you know, it stopped the pain completely. Now, it took a number of months. I think it was something like 8 months of doing this. But I went from severe pain all the time to being completely free from pain so that for me was miraculous, because who knows where I'd be now with that, right? Otherwise. Yes. So that's the kind of physical side of things. And then I continue now, like I said, to feel the safety of, oh, if I'm ill or if I get injured, I have Reiki. I can do something to help myself, right? So that's that side of things. The you know, there's also like big transformation for me, which you referred to as well, that I hadn't intended, which was just that a few months after learning, I just felt like I wanted to stop drinking alcohol altogether. And it wasn't like this big, I'm going to stop. Like, I was just like, nah, I don't want to do that anymore. So I stopped, and that was it. And I really attribute that to the Reiki that flowing through me all the time, because I was doing so much on myself. Plus, you know, I mein, the Reiju that we give, which I think people often say attunements, but we call them Reiju in my tradition. And so the Reiju, you know, is said to wake up the Tamashi, right? The soul, it wakes it up. And I think that's what was happening there, right? My soul was like, nah, this is not who you are, you know, so let's move away from that. And so I did with ease, you know. I became vegetarian. Not that that is something everyone has to do, but again, it was just a kind of natural thing that happened, you know. And so it's really interesting. So that's the kind of, there's those kind of transformations. I really heard it was loud when you said that there was a softening within you, because that's also what I felt, you know. There was definitely an internal and external softening within me.
You know, it's so funny you say, because I'm smiling because the same thing happened. Like I used to, prior to doing all of this, I worked in corporate every Friday, you know, happy hour, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was at the bar, out with friends, drinking, having a great time. And then when I started doing Reiki, and one of my friends and I, we had a standing weekly friends date. So no matter how busy life got, we would meet at a wine bar once a week. It was like a thing we did. And then when I started doing Reiki, I started getting, instead of wine, cranberry juice in a wine glass. And my friend was like, oh, are you not allowed to drink? And I was like, no, I just don't want it. It was the weirdest thing. I just didn't want it anymore. And even now, like just randomly, if you know, you're out and I'm like, oh, I'll try to drink, I'll have like 2 sips. And I'm just like, I just don't want it. It's so interesting. It wasn't something I, you know, thought I needed to stop, but just naturally occurred. But
I just want to be authentic here in that I do drink now, but every now and then it's just something that I do, you know, if I'm out, I might have a drink or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I try every now and again. I'll read on the menu. It looks like, ooh, that sounds delicious, but I never finish it. I don't know. But it's just interesting that happened without, again, not intending. But another thing with what you're saying, it reminds me of as well, with this whole idea of our individual and the collective transformation, how in these things that we recognize or realize in ourselves, and the potential that it may change our interaction with certain relationships and just how we show up, period. I mean, all across the board. I think, again, of how the effect of, say you go outside today and you smile and you say hello to someone, where maybe before you wouldn't have, I don't know, like I wouldn't have, now I would, right? But then that may have an effect on that person in ways we don't understand. And so it's so beautiful to think of how it does or can open us up in ways to perhaps even interact in ways, but not even realizing that extension of the work itself going so far beyond laying of hands. So like you were saying, it's not just over there in the corner, but it really does express itself out in everything that we do.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think we hugely underestimate the power of the smallest things to make huge differences, don't we? Generally in life.
Yeah.
And I've suffered with that as well. And I say suffered because I grew up with a horrible feeling that I had to change the world. It was this, I don't know, like savior complex thing I had, right?
Yeah.
Where I just was I would get so upset that I couldn't go and you know, change it, make a difference, go to a country and change the way it was all happening, you know. And it's I mean, I recognize now that that's not my job, right? That is a savior complex, but but it's you know, there's behind that, like you're saying, is actually just this beautiful part of me that just wants to make a difference in the world, wants, you know, wants to see and experience joy with people, and we are a collective. We can feel the collective, right? So you can, and if you're a sensitive person, of course, you know, when you see something on the news, it's horrifying, and you can feel the desperation, the despair, the whatever that is. And it's not bad to feel that. But what happens now is I'm able to feel it and allow myself to feel it and then come back to center, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before I wasn't. I would be stuck in that. And then, as you said before, you're not helping sitting in that place, right? You can only help from a more centered place. And, and again, what comes through this is the more we can shed, the stuff that we talked about, right? To become more aligned, to become more of expressing who we really are in the world, we're more available to actually do anything practical that we can to help emotionally supporting people, so yeah. And, I think we should also speak to the fact that, of course, the collective has an effect on the individual too, right?
Yes.
But, and so I do believe that there can come a point, where the collective can help to pull us as individuals into greater evolution too. We are not in that place right now. But, in a group, you can see that happen, right? If you're in a group of people, you can see that collective helping the individual. And if you choose your group carefully. But the collective is also, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, they say, but it's the quality of those parts makes a difference, right? Yes. If you have shitty parts in a car, it'll go, but they'll come together and it will work, but not well and not for long, right? So we contribute to the collective by making sure that the quality of our own contribution, our piece of the puzzle, that each individual soul has their own thing that they came to express and be, and that makes a difference to the world. So, it is, I do like to encourage people that way, right? Because it can feel pretty dark and helpless right now, but that's, we can do things, we can make a difference.
And still. I love that encouragement that you give, because I think we all need to hear that every day. But it's true. It's one of those things I always think, just as much as our heart breaks when you see, sad things occur, I also will find myself, with my eyes welling with tears when I see so many beautiful acts of kindness too. You see people going through something very devastating, but then you see people who don't know these people at all come together and really want to contribute and provide resources or whatever it may be. And so, as devastating as so many things can be, and it's heartbreaking, it also really pulls out the beauty of our humanity, where you see the way that we are very communal. And I think, to your point of, when you're young, wanting to really I gotta save the world, but it's but don't we all want to live in that kind of world?
That's what it really is behind it. I think we do. We know that is who we really are.
Right.
And, and I don't know this, but, sometimes I wonder, what's happening in the world, it's there to help us, right? We are not currently coming forward with those parts of us, very, very well, but this is, as you say, pulling that out of us. It's helping us to realize who we really are, because it's only when we can take our, face away from our phone and our computer and begin to see this immediate person who needs your help.
Yes.
That we can actually then go, oh yeah, that's who I am, and help, and so, I think in a way it's there for us too, right?
And it's amazing you say, because I think a lot of us even have this thing. I often have to think about this with myself. Why do I do that? Where we will be so quick to go and help someone else. And then when it comes to ourselves, we may put it off or think I don't know, I'll get around to it. But if someone else needs your help, you'll be right there. But I have to ask you about this, Amanda, because the time goes by so fast. I know from your bio, you did a 49-day pilgrimage, and I really wanted to know about that because it's so interesting. And again, I think a lot of us sometimes, especially when we start this work, we have this moment, at least a lot of people experience, where you feel like you have to hermit, go into solitude. I just need to shut out all the noise and really hear what's going on with me, right? And maybe do it in meditation, whatever. But what inspired you to do this pilgrimage, first of all? And how did that really contribute to your path? And was Reiki at all a part of this?
Good question. So I heard about the pilgrimage when I lived in Japan. I heard about this 88 temple pilgrimage. It's the only circular pilgrimage in the world, right? And you walk, it's just over 1,200 kilometers. And so you walk around the outside, basically, of this island in Japan, visiting 88 temples on the way.
Wow.
So there's a specific route.
I'm sorry, where do you sleep?
Wherever you can, basically.
Wow.
It's up to you. So you can book. Not that many people walk the whole thing these days. People go by car now, but there are places you can book on the way. For me, I just knew I wanted to do it. Everybody always says why, and I'm like, because I could feel the pull, I know I know when I hear about something first, I'm going to do that. And I knew I was, and I was like, oh God. And then it was years later, I ended up doing it. And so, I wanted it to be, like you say, a solo experience of allowing what was within me to come out. So it's more of the shedding, right? So I did it on my own. I didn't have a smartphone or anything. I just had an emergency phone. And I had no music or anything, right? So I was like, I got to face my stuff here.
Yeah.
And then I also had an agreement with myself that I would just sleep outside unless it was really raining, and then I could find somewhere. So those were my kind of agreements before I left with myself. And off I went, really naively, honestly, like really just not knowing how hard it would be at all. And which is, for me, sometimes the best way to do it, because otherwise I wouldn't do it, right? So I went, and and I will say that, having Reiki just made me feel safer before I left, right? So I knew if I injured myself, if I hurt myself, I was going to be all right. I had Reiki, and so had such a great trust in it by then that I really was like, it made a big difference. And so that was great. And in actual fact, on the journey, I think if it hadn't been for Reiki, I would have quit some way around. And that was simply because I had so much pain. I had a lot of blisters, and I met a couple of people who quit because of the blisters, because they say nothing, don't they? This little thing. But I mean, when you're walking so far every day, the pain is phenomenal. But I had a pain in my toes and my feet, and I felt it was emotional stuff actually coming out. I mean, I don't know what it was. There was no physical reason for it. But I got to one point where I cried most of the time anyway for the first 2 weeks, just all day, every day, because all the stuff was coming out and I couldn't distract myself with anything, right?
Yeah.
No music, no podcast, nothing. So I just cried, which is really weird in Japan, right? For people to see a foreigner wandering along the street just crying. But this one day or evening, it was like dark by the time I got to where I needed to stay. And I had this beautiful family, actually, because I was lost, and this beautiful family just kind of like encouraged me, this Japanese family trying to show me where to go. But that night I made an agreement with myself: if my feet hurt this much tomorrow, like, because it was the pain, it had been for so long, and I was done. I was like, I'm going to quit in the morning. And what I did do that night was I texted a friend of mine on the emergency phone and said, please ask people to give me Enkaku distant Reiki.
Right.
And she must have. I know she did, because people told me afterwards. And I woke up the next morning and they were not painful. So I was like, okay, on I go, That was about halfway around. So that was huge, Reiki wise. But, there's huge things I got from that journey. And one of the things was a deeper trust and sense of, I could feel the ground of well-being, underneath everything, that, like I was saying, that knowing that everything is okay. But But there were many occasions, a couple that were extreme, where I nearly died on the trip. And on one of them, I don't know if I would have died or not, but it was a typhoon, and I was climbing up this kind of waterfall thing that I didn't realize, on this like really steep mountain. And because it was raining so hard, because there was like this typhoon, it was literally just like climbing up a waterfall, you know.
Oh, wow.
Halfway up, and I just couldn't go on. My backpack was too heavy. I had too much stuff in it. It was more towards the beginning. And I just wanted to lie down and die in a puddle, like, and I was just prepared to just like let go of everything and just slide down and go. And I remember saying, right, in my head, and you know, the three teachers that I always ask for help in Reiki are Usui Sensei, Hayashi Sensei, and then Chiyoko Sensei, my teacher who's now dead. And so I always ask them for help, like in Reiki. And I remember saying to those three, like, why on earth aren't you helping me? For God's sake, help me, you know? I'm sure I was swearing as well, because I was really at the end. And I heard really loudly, right here, I heard, you didn't ask. And I was like, oh my God,
Wow.
You have to ask to get the help. It was so like pivotal. And I know that I use that now, because I often, you know, I and other people I know, you get to a place where you're like, oh my God, like, how can it be like this? And then I'm like, oh, you have to ask if you want help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that is, of course, in life with other people, but also with spirit and that kind of energy too. So that was a very cool thing that I learned. But there were so many things I learned on the way.
I can't even imagine. I mean, first of all, that you would even, well, I could see kind of being like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I personally know that I would have been like, how long? How would it know? I'm not going to do it. But I love hearing about your experience. Yeah, but definitely going along the way. I just have to say, one of the things that you said that really struck me is I had Reiki, and there was some comfort in that. And when you said it, it made me wonder, like, oh, do you mean the relationship and technique, right? Because to your point, you asked for Reiki, you were even able to, you know, apply to yourself and help to alleviate physical pain. You were out there crying, releasing all kind of emotion, just stuff was coming out of you, right? But I think for some of us anyway, you kind of come into relationship with the energy itself, and it becomes very palpable, and you can feel the presence of like your teachers and the energy itself surrounding you. And a lot of times meditation are just encounters in life. And I think that can be very comforting as well, because we can feel very alone in all kinds of life experience. But I can't imagine being on this pilgrimage by yourself over a month. Yeah, that's amazing. But did you feel, was the comfort of Reiki just in that you knew you had the technique, or was part of it just the essence of it that you had become familiar with?
Yeah, it's both, right? So there is the technique of physically, I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
But then also, you know, by then I had already, you know, Reiki is source energy. Reiki is that connection with spirit, right? That is it. And so therefore I had developed a relationship and a connection with spirit, right? That I actually could rely on, that gives me and continues to give me a deeper trust in the world and in life itself. And like I said, in the everything, that everything is okay, and that I'm supported. And I could feel that support so strongly, because, you know, I think it's only in those moments, right? Now at the moment I'm living, you know, I have a little flat here I'm living in, and, you know, I have a little routine. I'm doing my Tai Chi and which is wonderful. But I don't get pushed at the moment to those places that you're so desperate that is when you I'll speak about me. I'm so desperate that is when I realize and have, and it's not when I gain access to it, because we've always got access to it, right? But that's when I take my access to it at a deeper, greater level, and realize just how much support is there for me, just how not alone I am in a world where even now I seem quite alone sometimes, and so I'm not. I'm really, from my beautiful plants to, to the nature outside, to spirit, like this energy that's constantly there. It will never, and I think, Reiki is one of the things, and actually the first thing that really put me in touch with that.
I think one of the good things that, in case no one really thought about it, I'm glad that you mentioned the importance of asking for help, both out loud in the physical realm, but just even in general, asking for help and how impactful that can be. But even with so much of what you shared today, I have to ask you about this because, again, like we mentioned, we're often discouraged, even when we have access to this work and the tools, but yet, even hearing your story, you're still motivated and encouraged to keep going anyway, right? And you're reminding me so much of, I told you before we started recording, and for everyone, we're recording this way before it goes live. I was in Maui when the fires started, and very fortunate that we were able to leave. But it was a strange thing because from our hotel, you could see that night the fires, like we could visibly see it, and there was no electricity. Internet had gone out. The winds were horrendous because of the passing hurricane, which was causing the fires to spread. And so you knew people were losing everything, but we had no news, no internet. We had no communication, no access. So we didn't know what was being reported. We only could see visually, what was going on. And I was oddly calm. I mean, very calm. And then the next day when we were supposed to leave, everything looked like there was no way we were going to be able to. But these synchronistic things just kept lining up throughout the day where we made it to the gate 5 minutes before boarding. So, very thankful, right? And all throughout it, it was that. Even, I think, unconsciously in some ways, like connecting to, like being very meditative, feeling that essence of Reiki, asking for healing for the island, for the people, all the things. And even though there was this calmness, and even though there was this deep, deep gratitude, there was also this guilt to contend with of what other people were going through, right? So I think it can be so hard to have that recognition of we're not, like, it's not our fault, all the things that are happening in the world. And the best we can do, to your point, in so many ways, is keep doing the work here so that it expresses out into the collective, however that may be. And the more of us that do that, the more impactful it will be, on and on, right? But for you and your experience, how have you been able to stay diligent in your practice? Like, what has encouraged you despite the challenges in life, despite what you see in the world? What encourages you to stay so connected and committed to the work?
Well, firstly, I just want to acknowledge the Maui, what's happening there, because that is just beyond, isn't it? That's something else. And I'm glad that you were able to get out.
Yeah.
Feel for those who weren't, for sure. In response to your question, how do I keep going with it? Necessity, right? Because, it doesn't end, right? It doesn't.
No.
But so I have, I have a practice, a weekly heart circle practice I do with a friend of mine. I can't, it would take too long to maybe explain what they are here. Other than, it's so supportive in my own personal transformation, but also just in managing life, manage it. Because, you mentioned, okay, well, you were able to be in this kind of more centered, peaceful space, but you also were aware there was guilt and this and that. And, and I think that's important to be aware of those things. And again, we come back to this kind of bypassing emotions is not being centered, right? There has to be an acknowledgement of the emotions, and in many cases, if not all, a feeling of them. They need to be felt. That doesn't mean you sit in them and wallow in them and get lost in them.
Yes.
But to be felt, and to be felt in the presence of someone else, actually, when you're being witness to that, is hugely healing. And for me, what I've found is that will take me through and out the other side into the center, more into the heart space and the freedom. And to ignore those feelings is to have them always there, like calling at you, stuck, right?
Yeah.
And so the heart circles I do help me with that. And you cannot help in a heart circle but have to acknowledge what's really going on for yourself, and you find transformation. I find transformation through it. And so, having that weekly commitment with my friend is something that is extremely helpful. That's my friend date, right, that you were talking about.
Yes.
But I just think it goes up and down. I have times where I'm more in the practice of consciously looking at my stuff, and then I'll have times where I'm not so consciously practicing it. It's still happening, but to a lesser level, and I'll move in and out of that. And I think that's life. Life is like that. It's like the ocean and the waves, and we're constantly moving in and out of different things, and that's okay. And I think, but I don't want to stop it because of the freedom it brings me, right? Yeah. And of the peace it brings me. I know it's hard for me to go through stuff when it comes up, right? I got to feel it. Yeah. I've got to find my way through the forest, but I'm now have enough practice behind me that I know the rewards that come from doing it, and therefore I'd far rather do it and sit in the discomfort to get through.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, but everything you just said it kind of loops right back around to something you were saying in the beginning again, like that we really can't separate our personal transformation from the collective, right? Because what you said, it reminds me of how much we heal through each other's stories. Like we hear each other's stories, and we hear each other's hurts, and we hear each other's triumphs, whatever it may be. And there's so much that activates within us that we learn from, that we, emote from, like all the different layers. And it's beautiful. You're saying it just kind of puts that emphasis on how we are all interconnected, and we even learn through the grace of actually seeing each other and actually hearing each other, and just showing up in more loving ways, and how it could help us to become even more vulnerable. And yeah, that's beautiful, Amanda. Now you have my mind completely. I'm like, wow, I'm in awe of what you just said.
But you've really caught the essence of it there in terms of that, collective transformation. To be willing to sit with someone in the fire of their pain, right? Without trying to fix them or, make it better, or try and make yourself feel better by hugging them and to stop them, whatever we do to try and stop whatever the pain of emotion is. We have all these different ways of doing that, that we don't realize. And just to sit with someone in true presence, like you say, true presence, true compassion, we both move forward. You're absolutely right. And I do circles, like this, where it was started by a guy called Tej Steiner, not by me, but I learned it, and I do them with people. And that's exactly what you see is everybody having movements happen within them just by being there,
Yeah, it's amazing, because even you say that too, it makes me think of Reiki, right? And we have this beautiful opportunity to sit with someone, even without words, and you still feel each other, and there's still this beautiful exchange. And oftentimes at the end of a session, like you do feel, there was some effect on you, some healing for you. And I think you mentioned that in the beginning as well, but it's just so beautiful. Everything you're sharing, it just highlights how we can't be separate from each other. Like we're going to impact each other no matter what it is we do or how, but how beautiful we have a tool that helps us to be more mindful in how we are showing up and holding space for the world, really, and ourselves. So I have to say with that, because I just want to clarify to make sure I understood what you said. It sounds like with all that you shared in your beautiful story, that life itself is the path. Life is the path. And then we have this beautiful essence, Reiki, and the techniques within the system that really help us to navigate the path. And that may look different for each of us. We may, whatever we're going to do, but it's just a nice something that we get to come into relationship with to help navigate the path and bring us into deeper awareness that whatever we're doing individually is in essence really for the collective, and whatever we do within the collective is in essence for us as individuals.
Yes,
yeah?
That's it. Yeah. That is how I see it, that, and you can't underestimate, I just want to say again, Reiki as a system that really encompasses all of it, right? That allows transformation on all levels to become more aligned and live more and more as who we really are,
Yeah. But I love what you said too, and it's ongoing. Because again, like you mentioned, I just was fascinated. Okay. I had no clue. I when it was recommended to me, someone said, this will help you alleviate stress, right? And so I Googled it. They told me to have a session, but I Googled it and I'm like, this sounds crazy. So I signed up for a class, of course, naturally, right? So I was like, oh, this sounds so strange. I think I'm going to take a class. And then I was just so fascinated and curious simply by what I was feeling. What I was feeling was so different than, anything I had. And so again, I could have never imagined what the experience of bringing these techniques in as part of practice and work and really coming into relationship with Reiki as essence and energy and of itself, could have never imagined that it would have all of these profound impacts on me, my life, and all the things, again, that were woven into your story. So I think like how fun for people who may be watching where this may be new to your path, and you too may be like, I have no idea. This is just fun. Like, just wait. You're going on an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm the same as well. Like I need to experience stuff to really be in it,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, Amanda, I mentioned in the beginning that you co-authored an amazing book. If anyone hasn't read it, you should absolutely read it. It's called Women in Reiki. That was such a brilliant book. So go read that if you haven't already. Women in Reiki, everyone should read that book. It was absolutely just amazing. But I also read in your bio that you did write a book about some near-death experiences within your travels and how that shaped your life. I know we have to wrap up, but just wanted to ask you a little bit about that and then where we could learn more about your work. So did that happen a lot, that you wrote a book? And what were the effects on you?
Well, I mean, I went traveling when I was, I don't know how old I was, 27, 28 or something. I went off traveling around. And I just seemed to have a series of things happen. I think they do when you go traveling, right? And some of them were more nearer death than others.
Yeah.
But I did have a couple of very, very close shaves. And so, yeah, I wrote a book about them really as a fun, it's actually as a kind of fun travel anecdotes, but within it, because this is kind of how I see life, right? There's this kind of fun traveling through life, but there's this huge depth and wisdom that comes up like within it. So I wrote this as just a little book that was showing that. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, the book has, I had some issues with the publisher in America. So it's not on sale now, but I'm just re-editing it. And I might add a story from the pilgrimage. I'm debating that, which was even more kind of like mind-blowing.
Was it not the waterfall? There was
no,
something else?
No.
Oh.
There was another one which was full on, and I won't say it now. I mean, it's unbelievable, I think. Well, even for me now, if I hadn't written it down and experienced it, I'd be like, really? But it was pretty full on. So I'm wondering whether to put that in it or not. It might be a little too extreme. I don't know.
Well, now you have to. I mean, because now we're all like.
So I'm just redoing that. But again, like each experience of that kind of thing just brings you deeper, I think, into life and deeper into the trust. I mean, every time something like that happened, someone or something would turn up out of nowhere to help me. Like literally, you would never believe that this would, and I guess the one that comes back to me the most in my everyday life was the drowning one, where I went down. I was in Nepal and I was doing just whitewater rafting. People do, right? Because I chose a cheap company, right? They weren't
just that easy thing.
Yeah.
Who are you, Indiana Jones?
Yeah. Anyway, so it was like really fast. It was big rapids, right? I couldn't swim, and so I immediately, like literally, we just started.
Wait! I'm sorry. You don't know how to swim? You couldn't swim, or you couldn't swim because of the currents?
No, I didn't know how to swim.
You didn't know how to swim, and you went, what? Oh, you are a daredevil. Okay. Just wanted to make sure to know. No. You're adventurous.
So anyway, we get in the boat and they tell us very little. I mean, I had a life thingy on, and then like literally we hit these first rapids that was really fast. It had been raining. I think they were like level 5 rapids. They're really big rapids, and instantly we go down. I'm on the back of the boat and I get like bumped out just straight away. So now I'm going down these like level 4 and 5 rapids on my own in the water, just getting like spun and smashed against rocks. And I couldn't, even if you could swim, I'm not sure actually you could do much situation. But anyway, so I'm just getting spun around and smashed, and I've got cuts everywhere and all sorts. And to start with, I was just trying to kind of keep my head, take a breath every time I was underwater, and it just went on and on and on. And then suddenly it stopped, right? And I came out and there was like more of a pool, and I could like kind of see and hear everybody shouting, like looking for me, right? And I heard someone say, "There she is," right? And then in that moment, I got sucked into a whirlpool. And then I just got sucked under. So now I'm spinning under the water. And I was trying to get up, but I was already exhausted, right, from going down the rapid. And I couldn't swim, and I didn't know what to do. I had no kind of knowledge of what to do in a whirlpool. And so I just couldn't get up. I could not get out. And I fought and fought and fought under the water until I came to a place where I was like, I have to breathe. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I remember panicking and thinking, I'll die when I breathe. And then suddenly I was like, it's what I have to do. And in the moment that I chose to breathe the water in, I can't get the words for it. I was filled with this absolute peace. It was literally like everything, every noise, right? And that noise, mind noise, but also the noise of like fears and everything, right?
Yeah.
Just disappeared, right? And I felt lighter than I've ever felt. And I remember I went to take in a breath of the water, and it felt the most beautiful thing I had ever. It was so exquisite. Wow. And I was like, wow, I'm going to die. Like I changed it. And I went to like breathe in the water, and I could see this huge light, like getting brighter and brighter. Yeah. And at that moment, as I went to breathe in, something, I have no idea what it was, literally propelled me out of the water. And so I came flying out of the water, like vertically.
Yeah.
And I breathed air instead of water, because as I went to breathe, and it was the sun was the light, or
Wow.
it was another light and it changed into the sun. I don't know, but that's what happened. I just flew up out the water, took in a breath, and then somebody threw me a rope in that moment, and I grabbed it. And I remember there was this kind of realization as all of the noise piled back in. There was almost a disappointment of the noise again,
Right.
live, but of the noise and and then there was obviously panic and getting me out.
Of course.
But that, I often go back to that moment, because that's one of the things that helped me feel less afraid. I'm not saying I don't feel afraid at all of dying. Of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid of after death, but dying. But that did take away something for me. And again, just it gave me the knowing that when we do go, it's the right time. Right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise something will happen. And each of those near-death experiences did that, I think, for me, more and more and more, until that one when I was like, when you go, it's obviously your time, because otherwise some other thing is going to get in the way.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of more of a peace with that.
Well, you obviously have to do the editing and get this book out so we can all, because I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, like, oh my gosh. But It's amazing too. I think it kind of weaves in again with things that you shared earlier, how no matter how we may categorize the experience itself, they all have the potential to really shape us in some phenomenal way. But that moment of peace that you described, there was another interview here in the summit, and I shared a story with someone, but I had an experience where there was a moment of like, I get it, of our interconnectedness. But it was like a blip on the screen, like you probably couldn't count past one, right? But that one sliver of a moment of feeling that feeling changed me in ways that I will never be able to articulate, and I don't even fully understand. But I think that's what it is. Like, we just need to have a glimpse of those encounters, or a glimpse of that feeling, that essence of Reiki that we experience, that those moments of feeling so connected and intertwined with the world around us, even if they're just moments of whatever it is, it changes us in such phenomenal ways. And it's interesting with yours. I mean, death is like one of the biggest underlying fears for all of us. Even if we're not walking around thinking about it, it's back there, right? It's like, da, 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 like you're running out of time. So yeah, I mean, like for that to alleviate to any degree has to be just so profoundly, well, God, you didn't need to be more adventurous. I mean, it sounds like you were already there anyway, little daredevil just living.
I don't know what I was doing. Yeah. I was just like, yeah, next. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so amazing. I can't thank you enough for coming and having this conversation. I'm sure so much of what you shared is going to have everyone really thinking. And it was beautiful, very thought-provoking, Amanda, but as is your work. And I just wanted to let everyone know, of course, if you can let us know your website, and people can go there and sign up for the newsletter and receive updates from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I write little things like it's about Reiki, but then I sometimes bring in a few other things as well. Find interesting about life, because as I said, Reiki is part of life, right?
Yes. So we can learn about your Reiki classes, which you teach Jikiden. We can learn about the heart circles. Is that what they're called?
Yes, the heart circles and my books and that's a different website. I can give you,
Okay.
to put together, in case people want to go and just have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, because it sounds like it all weaves into your beautiful path, and we can learn from all of it. So absolutely. So Amanda C. Jayne, JAYNE.com is one of the sites. The links to connect with Amanda are just below the interview. And obviously, I mean, how could you not want to learn more about her and her work after all these beautiful sharings? But thank you so much, my love. It was good to see you again, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to chat to you. It really is. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I had fun. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us. May the wisdom you've gained, the practices you've learned, and the light you've cultivated continue to illuminate your path long after this summit concludes. To find out more about our global community and the wide variety of Reiki articles and infographics, free guided meditations, free ebooks or workbooks, online courses, and global summits, visit ReikiRaise.com.